If you're innovating, creating, or making a difference, this show is for you. Welcome to Over Coffee. I'm Dot Cannon. Here on Over Coffee, we talk with artists and innovators about the process of changing the world in terms of what they do.
When you have the headset on and you can look up and see the clouds in the sky that I saw, you can look down and you can see the snow being plowed, or you can look to your right and see me skiing away. It's a more interesting way to learn. And we know that it's not enough for students just to consume 3D virtual reality. It's also important that students be able to create their own. And so we provide creator spaces. What we don't want to do with AI is to remove the struggle of learning. Really, when we have a tough issue to figure out and we dig in and we struggle to learn, that's when new connections are being made in our brain.
VictoryXR is reimagining learning to make it exciting, engaging, and most of all, effective. Iowa-based VictoryXR combines virtual reality, augmented reality, and artificial intelligence to create immersive real-world learning experiences, which spark the imagination while helping students retain what they've learned. And these simulations are available for learners of all ages, K through 12, higher education, and career and technical training. VictoryXR's services include their Global Traveler virtual reality field trips, which take students for a 360-degree view of more than 140 locations all over the world. There's also their VXR Labs app, which includes a number of free simulations and is available on PC computers and MetaQuest headsets, and their free 24/7 AI student tutor called HoloTutor. Steve Grubbs is the co-founder and CEO of VictoryXR. Steve, how did you first discover your passion for combining innovation, technology, and education to create a positive impact on the world?
Well, it's interesting. People always ask, are entrepreneurs born or are they made? And I would say in my case, it was a combination of the two. From the time I was a very small child, I've been very innovative, entrepreneurial. I opened my first store when I was 7. I'd roll my little store down to the street and sell pop and junk goods and that kind of thing. So I've always been entrepreneurial. But at the same time, it's not enough to just have that desire to create, to innovate. You have to study the art of business and innovation. And so I've spent a lot of time doing that. And I spent the early part of my adult career in politics. I was in the Iowa legislature. I was chair of the House Education Committee, and it really drove a passion of mine to figure out ways to improve education through innovation. Because one thing I learned pretty quickly was that you weren't going to solve the problems of education from a top-down government mandate. And so the opportunity of innovation and schools doing creative things. And we've seen this whole movement toward charter schools and school choice. And so people are trying so many amazing things and the best ideas are starting to rise up to the top. And so that motivated me in 2016 to really go full time into ed tech entrepreneurship.
And please tell me, from there in 2016, how was VictoryXR born?
So it was the very early days of virtual reality. The first consumer headsets launched in 2015, 2016. And so I tried one on and I thought, my father was a public school teacher. I was educated in public schools from kindergarten through law school. And I thought that this is a good way to motivate and inspire students to learn. And so I had to figure out, how do you do it? How do you build this stuff? I mean, it was just a mystery in a concealed box to me. So I went to work learning, teaching myself. as much as I could, talking to people that were in the know. And after doing that, we created our first 360 video. That was our very first experience. And then I hired developers, both Unity coders and modelers who could build our first experience, which was a space traveling on a starship to various cosmologically interesting locations to learn about black holes and that type of thing. So that's how we got started. And early on, we got a contract with Microsoft, which was helpful. And we've continued to grow from there.
Fast forward to today. I hope I have my figures correct here. 200 school districts, 160 universities, 30 countries have VictoryXR. What has been one of your absolute best experiences with any one of these educational institutions implementing the systems you have?
Yeah, so first of all, I would say that those are some numbers that are a little bit dated because every month we're growing, but we're growing nicely and continuing to expand around the world. So one of the more interesting experiences was Inspired EDU, which is a global education school. They've got schools all over the world, over 100,000 students, and they wanted a digital twin that their students globally could learn in. And so we flew to Reading, England, Reading, Reading, spelled like reading. And we digitally captured this entire school that, from an American perspective, looked like Hogwarts. And our modelers recreated it from about 300 images. And so then inspired the students from around the world as they would enter this school. They might have been in South America, or they might have been in Africa or somewhere else, but they would enter school into this Harry Potter looking building in Reading, England, but it was all a digital 3D recreation. And then they would learn a lot of different subjects in that school. But it's just one of those wonderful experiences. And today, thousands of students enter that school all the time.
If I were a student, I would love to go into that Hogwarts-looking school. As you create experiences, I'd love to look at 3 different applications here, starting off with your global traveler. You have an interesting way of teaching history. At one point, you do a 360 video, and you're on your skis as you share the history of Colorado. I wish you'd take me behind the scenes with you and tell me about creating that experience.
So we generally ski once a year. I'm not the world's greatest skier, but I can ski well enough to ski down Copper Mountain with my poles in one hand and the 360 camera in the other hand. So for those who may not know what a 360 camera is, it's a camera that, for the most part, we think of a camera as shooting or imaging what is directly in front of the camera. But with a 360 camera, it shoots all around, up and down. So when I'm skiing down the mountain, Copper Mountain, I am able to tell the story of how geologically, how the mountains were formed, and then go into some history, some more modern history about how Colorado developed, starting with the native tribes, then moving into more modern times. And it's a more interesting story when you have the headset on and you can look up and see the clouds in the sky that I saw. You can look down and you can see the snow being plowed, or you can look to your right and see me skiing away, although I've got my helmet on, so it could be a stunt double. Never going to tell. But anyway, so it's a more interesting way to learn. And then we overlay additional videos and images and graphic charts to bring it to life, along with sound effects, the whole thing. So, it's a 2D video on steroids, and it's a great, wonderful way to learn. And because you're immersed, students retain dramatically more information.
What I especially like, I remember history classes as being date, fact, date, fact. You are giving the human aspect of history. You are coming up with, for example, why was it so difficult for the Allies to land on the beach at Sicily? I especially like that. Where's all this coming from? Are you a history buff too?
Well, so there's two of us that do these 360 videos. Wendy, the science teacher, 20 years in the classroom, and me, the son of a history teacher. And so, yes, I love history. I love learning history. I love traveling to see, so we've put the cameras on both sides of the English Channel to understand the D-Day invasion. Of course, we went to Sicily and with General Patton and Montgomery landing there for the start of the Allies fighting back. We've been to Hiroshima in Japan, which is quite an experience, and all over the world. There's 160 of these, about half history, half science, and it's just a really, to stand on the beaches of Normandy, to be able to look down and see the sand. And then we go into a German pillbox that's still there today, and you can see what it's like, what the Germans' view was. So it's dramatic. And again, it is memorable for students.
And when you mentioned Wendy, the science teacher, I'm intrigued that you have some interesting science aspects that I wouldn't have thought of. Snake charming, billiards, Ferris wheel, stuff that we're probably not going to get in the standard science lab.
Yeah, the billiards one is an interesting one because as we shoot these 360 field trips, we generally think in terms of, going on location. But here we were teaching the science of force, Newton's laws. And we thought, why don't we put a 360 camera right down in the middle of a pool table? And then Wendy was able to teach about force and action and reaction and all these laws that are not my expertise. And students are there. It's as if they are sitting on the pool table, looking around, and then at the same time learning Newton's laws. So, we try to be creative. Most of the time we're going on location. We just went to Maine for the fall foliage. And, there's a lot of chemistry involved in leaves turning from green to orange to red to brown. And so we take the drone and we drop it in the middle of all these trees. And Wendy, the science teacher, teaches about the chemistry that's going on inside those leaves. So again, what a great way to learn, to be able to fly through the trees in the northeast part of the United States.
Before we go on with the other applications here, if a teacher is listening, a homeschooling parent, how do they find out more about these global traveler applications, and how do they get signed up if they would like to?
Yeah, so we have two products. We have VXR Labs, which is the virtual reality product, and we have HoloTutor, which is the AI tutor product. And you can learn all about both at VictoryXR.com, or you can just email me, steve@VictoryXR.com, and I'll make sure that you get the information you need from the person in the company that's best suited to answer your questions.
VictoryXR.com, steve@VictoryXR.com. Let's look at VXR Labs, because I got to look at that last evening, and I confess the King's Labyrinth is driving me crazy. I got lost in it. Would you tell me a little bit about some of the simulations available? There's some free ones and some paid ones.
Yeah, so VXR Labs, I always use the analogy, it's like television, right? So you have the free channels, and then you have the basic subscription, and then you have some premium channels. So VXR Labs is set up the same way. You can download VXR Labs from the MetaQuest store for free. And there's a lot of really cool free content in there. But if you upgrade to the basic subscription, which is about $11, $12 a month, then you get access to the 160 global field trips, frog dissection, and hundreds of other learning experiences in a dozen or more disciplines. So there's a lot there. And then finally, there's a few premium products, and that's because we have partners that we have to pay when their content is used. So we have some advanced dissection that we do with Carolina Biological and virtual reality, and we have some advanced CTE career training that we do with our partner there.
I love that you can interact with some things in the free application. You have that in the Luxor Temple where you can pick up a Sphinx. You can look at the statue, I believe it is Ramses II, and
Yeah.
look at it close up and turn it around, which is not something we can do in actual space.
Well, here's the amazing thing about our Egypt trip, and a good portion of it is free. So there are two temples, the Temple of Karnak and the Temple of Luxor. And what we didn't know as a modern civilization, that the ancient Egyptians had built a 3 kilometer walk, the Avenue of the Sphinxes, where they had lined it with like 1,000 sphinxes. And we didn't know it because sand over the years had covered everything up. And so, starting in the 1970s, they accidentally discovered that this was down there and they began excavating it. And it took 50 years. And it was just 3 or 4 years ago that the Avenue of the Sphinxes, for the first time in 3,000 years, was walkable between the two, the Karnak and Luxor. And so we did that. We took our cameras there and we walked it. But at the same time, you can also do it. We also graphically recreated it. So no matter where you are in the world now, you can experience the Avenue of the Sphinxes within VXR Labs.
Now, I experience this in my headset, but do I understand that it's also accessible via a PC?
Yes, you can download an application to your PC and experience it in the same way.
That would make it a whole lot easier for anybody who, for example, is homeschooling. Maybe they don't have much of a budget or anything to do something like this. I did want to mention that you have a create space. And what I especially like is at the beginning, you say, have you ever done VR before? Or do you understand what a create space is? This is perfect for somebody who's just beginning.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Dot. We know that it's not enough for students just to consume 3D virtual reality. It's also important that students be able to create their own. And so we provide creator spaces where students can go in and build their own worlds, their own rooms, their own learning experiences, and save them. And it could be a class assignment that they're graded on, or it could be just simply a way for them to go and release their own creativity.
What's been one of the most fun ways that you've seen a student use that to create their own experience?
Yeah, it's been fun to watch students take some of the ancient Egypt artifacts and create their own museum-like experiences. And so that's one of the cool things, is that to be able to see an actually scanned sarcophagus and then to be able to manipulate it in your own museum, that's a really powerful opportunity to learn and to commit information to memory.
There's also your Hollow Tutor. And I was going to ask you about how does it work, but I'd love to do something with our imagination with you if you're up for it.
Sure.
What I'd like to do, considering that you do training for just about everybody, K through 12, university, and professional, suppose I wanted to use the Hollow Tutor. Let's say I want to do a course on public speaking. And I want Mark Twain as an avatar on a Mississippi riverboat to talk about public speaking. How might we do this?
So there are two things that we would have to do on our end. First of all, we would have to upload an avatar that looks like Mark Twain, which we haven't done yet. And second, we would have to upload an environment that looks like a riverboat, which we also haven't done yet. But using our existing tools, you can customize your avatar to look however you want. And then you can upload the information, or you can tell the AI to write it for you. And then you choose your environment. And once you've done that, you'll have a professor. And then you can upload videos, you can upload images, you could upload passages from either the book Huck Finn or Mark Twain and have them summarized or translated into any language. But you have a lot of tools to build these lessons. Over time, we'll add more historical characters and we will add more environments to choose from. And it can all be done in less than an hour. And then you can deploy it to both a Chrome or Safari browser, or you can drop it into virtual reality so that a student with a headset can experience it as well.
How does the AI tell me if the teaching's effective, if the student is learning what they need to know?
Yeah, so We have a Nexus tool, and students have to opt into that with the permission of their school and parent for federal tracking purposes if they're under a certain age, 13. But, if you're a college student, you can opt in yourself. Anyway, it's going to keep track of what we do when we build lessons, internal lessons, is we drop a little assessment question every 2 minutes just to make sure you're paying attention to the concepts that are being taught. They're not real difficult. They're true, false, multiple choice, but we know when you're getting the answers correctly. And it doesn't really matter what we know. Your instructor can see how well you're doing on those check-in questions throughout the lessons, and they can see how many lessons you've completed. So what we don't want to do with AI is to remove the struggle of learning. And that's, we've talked for decades about making learning easier. But I think we all know that really when we have a tough issue to figure out and we dig in and we struggle to learn, that's when, new connections are being made in our brain. And so we don't want to relieve that. We want students we're going to provide the information in an immensely consumable way, but they have to be learning through that. They can't just be receiving. They have to be doing some problem solving throughout the experience. And in that way, we believe that the solution we're providing is really a helpful one.
That's what I'm finding exciting about AI is people are saying, oh, it's going to take the place of thinking. No, it's not. It's a real creative thought partner here. And it looks like we'll be doing every bit as much work creating something, just creating differently.
I think that's exactly right.
You spoke to the Senate about how the U.S. needs to be dominant with AI in the future, or we get left behind and it gets used for the wrong purposes. What are some of the ways that you're doing this right now with VictoryXR?
Yeah, my point to the U.S. Senate was this. How you feed a large language model determine what its output is going to be. So, for example, I don't think in China, your LLM is going to discuss what happened in Tiananmen Square in 1989 at all. I think there's a lot of history that will be left out because there's a top-down government control over the information that's fed into those LLMs. And so if those become the dominant LLMs around the world, then that's the viewpoint that people learn from. And so I think it's important for the United States and countries with freer societies to populate their LLMs. And we're going to have lots of debates about how they're populated with information, what the outputs are, where the biases are. Those are healthy debates. But with competing platforms, all trying to find the best way to get it done, that matters. And it especially matters for us. But when we structure a lesson, and let me give you a perfect example. Let's say we're talking about it's a lesson from a healthcare provider on how to deal with lower back pain. Now, that lesson, when you ask the AI instructor questions, it could give you an answer from the view of an orthopedist, medical industry. It could give you from a pharmacist, a chiropractor, a massage therapist. And so that lesson needs to be focused on one or the other. If this is a class in a medical school, then it's going to be from the view of the orthopedic surgeon and the pharmacist. But if it's at Palmer College of Chiropractic, it's going to be from the view of chiropractic. And so that's important that we, in creating the lessons, give the opportunity to limit what is being said and the areas in which it's said. So if a student goes in and they're learning about Abraham Lincoln and they ask a question about Taylor Swift, our AI instructors will say, well, Taylor Swift is awesome, but let's get back to Abraham Lincoln.
I love that. We should mention that HoloTutor can be downloaded. You have a free plan, but what if people are listening from, let's say, a school where they really want to implement one of your programs, paid programs, and they just don't have the funds? Are there grants available?
So we will assist schools with grants. We have an entire Google Drive of information that they can just copy and paste into the grant to really relieve about 80% of the required information. And AI makes it easier today as well. So that friction of filling out the application is something that we can help with. But in addition, we will regularly advertise grants that are available and try to find schools that are interested in pursuing them.
Once again, information available on the website. I believe you have a blog as well.
Yes.
And the final question is the signature question for my podcast. If people can only get one thing from you about innovation, creativity, and making a difference, what would you really love them to take away from the work you're doing right now with VictoryXR?
Yeah, I would say this. This is not my first company. I started multiple companies and 2 of them are successful. And if I have learned one lesson, it's that the single most important thing is not intelligence, it's not investor capital, it's not having the right idea. The single most important thing is grit, perseverance, because every day it's going to be hard, not boring, definitely hard. And to succeed, you can't get 6 months into it, a year into it, and just be overwhelmed and bail out. You have to be able to push through. And ideally, you naturally have a personality that is optimistic. I think it would be extremely difficult to succeed in a world of innovation where you just naturally have a pessimistic view, like, oh, this is not going to work. This is going to fail. Why am I doing this? We're going to go bankrupt. And I have always had an unusually high level of optimism and perseverance in these things. Get me out running, not so much perseverance, but entrepreneurship, lots of perseverance.
Steve, thank you for your time today.
All right. Well, Dot, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you taking an interest in what we're doing at VictoryXR.
You and I have been listening to Steve Grubbs, co-founder and CEO of VictoryXR. Download VictoryXR's VXR Labs platform for free and check out their interactive educational content. Among the experiences you'll find are their Luxor Temple field trip, as well as the King's Labyrinth, which is going to have math content that's very different than what we remember from traditional math classes, and of course, their Create Space. You can also download their free-to-use 24/7 AI student tutor, HoloTutor, and get a look at the trailers for VictoryXR's Global Traveler virtual reality field trips. Once again, their website is VictoryXR.com. And that concludes this edition of Over Coffee. Thank you for listening. Listen to more Over Coffee podcasts at twomavericks.com. That's 2 TWO Mavericks, Maverix. Be sure you subscribe. It's free by clicking the link on our website. Our music is royalty-free production music provided by Pond5 at pond5.com. I'm Dot Cannon. Here's wishing you a cappuccino day.